"You're embarrassing me, Orson." That's what she said, calmly, like I was an inconvenience. Not a husband, not a person, just background noise. The wine had already started soaking through my shirt. My tie hung limp and stained, the red creeping through the fabric like some kind of slow, spreading wound. I hadn't moved. I hadn't blinked. She did it so casually, like setting down a napkin or adjusting her earrings. She looked at me, half smirking, and said, "You never belonged here. You stick out, like a fly in a glass of champagne." People at the party turned. A few tried not to stare. One woman gasped softly and looked away, like she couldn't decide who to pity more. But Maribel? She just tossed her empty glass onto a nearby table and took a bite of her hors d'oeuvre like nothing happened. I wish I could say I stormed out. I wish I had some badass one-liner. I didn't. I stood there, soaked, speechless, stunned, staring at her while the jazz band in the corner played some god-awful instrumental cover of Don't Stop Believin'. And in that exact moment, she realized something. Not because I said a word, I didn't, but because of the look on my face. Something in my eyes unsettled her. Not anger, not sadness. Something worse, certainty. She realized I wasn't going to fight her anymore. I was going to leave. For real this time. Not a dramatic threat. Not a cold shoulder. I was already gone, even though I hadn't taken a step. That look, that silence, scared her more than yelling ever could. She tried to play it off, tried to keep chewing. But I saw her jaw twitch. I saw her blink twice, fast. I saw her reach for her phone like it might anchor her to reality. Too late. You don't wine-baptize a man like that in front of a room full of donors, CEOs, and old family friends without consequences. She thought she was ending me. She just gave me the start I never had the courage to take. I didn't leave right away. I wish I had. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there with the taste of copper in my mouth and the distant, buzzing echo of her words ricocheting in my skull. The laughter from across the ballroom slowly resumed like someone had hit play again, but I knew they were still watching. Not all of them. Just enough to feel the humiliation cling to me tighter than the wine-soaked dress, shirt I could already feel beginning to itch. Maribel floated away like a performer who'd just finished her act, walking straight into a huddle of men in sharp suits and surgically white smiles. She didn't even look back. That part stung more than the wine, more than the insult. She didn't need to see the damage. That meant she already knew it was done. Someone handed me a napkin. I don't remember who. I wiped at the stain, but it just smeared darker. I must have muttered a thank you, or maybe I didn't. The napkin hit the floor, and I realized my hands were shaking. Not from rage, from adrenaline, from the slow, creeping sensation that something irreversible had just happened, and that it had been building for a very, very long time. Maribel had changed in increments. Not all at once. That's how I missed it. Little things. Laughing a second too long at other men's jokes. Talking over me in public. Rolling her eyes when I offered to help. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. That she was stressed. That I was too sensitive. But when someone spills wine on you and calls you a loser in front of 40 people, it gets harder to play defense. I finally walked out when the music shifted to something upbeat and fake cheerful. It felt like a joke. Like the universe was clapping after the punchline. The air outside hit me like a slap. Cold and sharp, almost cleansing. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the valet booth like I couldn't remember how anything worked. My car was only 20 feet away, but I didn't move toward it. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the little box. Yeah, that box. I had planned to give it to her that night. Not a proposal, we were already married. This was different. Inside was a pair of antique earrings she'd once told me reminded her of her grandmother. I'd tracked them down through 2 estate sales, an eBay bidding war, and 3 weeks of unanswered emails. She had no idea I even remembered that conversation. And now? Now I couldn't even look at the box. I should have thrown it away. But I didn't. Because something inside me, the last pathetic thread of hope maybe, wanted her to see it. To see what I had brought her before she decided to shatter me like glass stemware on a ballroom floor. So I turned around and went back inside. The doors of the ballroom swung open as I stepped back in, and I swear I felt the temperature change. Conversations dulled for just a second, as though my return pulled at the edges of everyone's curiosity. A man drenched in wine who'd just been humiliated by his wife wasn't supposed to come back. He was supposed to crawl home, lick his wounds, maybe drown himself in whiskey and regret. That's the script people expected. But I wasn't following that script anymore. Mary Bell was still surrounded by her circle of admirers, laughing at some meaningless anecdote a man in a navy suit was telling. She tilted her head, touched her necklace, and leaned in just a little too close. The kind of body language that made it obvious she wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a while. I didn't walk toward her. Not yet. Instead, I moved to the far side of the room, pretending to study the silent auction items lined along the wall. A signed baseball, a weekend trip to Napa, a painting I couldn't afford even on my best day. All of it blurred in front of me because my mind was locked on the small velvet box burning a hole in my pocket. My hands itched to take it out, not to give it to her anymore, but to show her. To let her see what she had thrown away before she even knew it existed. I waited, watched, let the tension in the room stretch. Because whether she wanted to admit it or not, she noticed I was back. I saw it in the way her laughter grew too loud, too forced, her eyes darting toward me for the briefest flickers before darting away again. She wanted me invisible, erased, but my silence was louder than anything I could have said. Finally, I crossed the floor. My shoes echoed against the polished marble, every step deliberate. People parted just slightly, sensing something was about to happen. Mary Bell's smile faltered when I stopped at the edge of her circle. The man in the navy suit glanced at me with polite irritation, the way you look at a waiter who's interrupted your story. I didn't address him. I didn't even look at him. My eyes locked on hers, steady, unblinking. For a heartbeat, we stood there suspended, her smugness battling something she couldn't quite mask, unease. She didn't know what I was going to do, and that uncertainty was the first crack in her armor. Slowly, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the box. I didn't open it. I didn't explain it. I simply placed it on the cocktail table between us. A velvet box, elegant and understated, sitting there like a confession she hadn't asked for. Her face drained of color. She knew what it was. She knew what it meant. And she knew she had just destroyed the moment before it ever happened. The room went quiet again, as though everyone had tuned into the silent war raging between us. I leaned in just enough for only her to hear and whispered, "This was yours." Then I stepped back, leaving the box where it sat. She reached for it, but I shook my head once. And that simple gesture, denying her the right to touch it, shattered her composure more than the wine, more than any insult could have. I turned and walked away again. This time, she didn't laugh. She didn't follow. She just stood frozen in the center of her perfect little circle, her mask slipping, while everyone else tried not to notice. That was the night I realized. Humiliation cuts both ways. And hers had only just begun. I didn't expect her to follow me out of the ballroom. But she did. Not immediately. She waited, of course, because Mary Bell doesn't chase. Not in public. But maybe she felt the crack begin to widen under her heels. Maybe the silence I left behind rang louder than the music. Maybe the velvet box still sitting untouched on that table burned a hole into her image. Whatever it was, she followed. I had just reached the edge of the parking lot when I heard the clack of her heels. Sharp, rhythmic, accelerating. I didn't stop walking, not until she grabbed my wrist. Not hard, just enough to make contact. I turned slowly. She was out of breath, which annoyed her more than anything. She always hated looking flustered. "You're seriously going to pull that move?" she hissed. "What? Trying to humiliate me now? Is that your big moment?" I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scrambling to explain myself. I wasn't backpedaling. I wasn't apologizing for emotions I hadn't even expressed yet. "I was going to give you that gift after your speech," I said quietly. "But I guess you already made your speech." She looked away for a moment, jaw clenched. "You're being dramatic." I laughed. It wasn't a strong, confident laugh. It cracked halfway through, nervous, awkward. The kind of laugh that says I've finally lost the plot, haven't I? But it was still the most honest sound I'd made in months. She folded her arms. "Let's go. We can talk in the car." The car ride was suffocating. She drove. Her choice. Her car. She always insisted we take hers to events because she said mine smelled like dust and sadness. The irony didn't hit me until we were halfway home, and I could still smell the wine dried into my clothes, sour and clinging. "I'm not doing this tonight," she said finally, eyes locked on the road. "You're not dragging me through a guilt trip because you're too sensitive to handle a joke." A joke. She called it a joke. I stared out the window. The city lights blurred past, and my reflection in the glass looked smaller than I remembered, like I was shrinking in real time. Her words hit me in waves. First anger, then disbelief, then that all-too-familiar guilt. The one I always seemed to carry when she hurt me. Somehow, I was always the one left bleeding and apologizing for bleeding. I don't know what came over me, but I said it before I could stop myself. You cheated on me, didn't you? She didn't slam on the brakes. She didn't gasp or deny it. She just kept driving. Her grip on the wheel tightened, so tight her knuckles turned pale. I don't think now's the time, she muttered. That was it. Not a denial. Not an apology. Just a casual dodge like I'd asked about the weather. I found the receipts. I added, voice lower. The hotel in Sacramento. The restaurant 2 blocks from your office. The necklace in the glove box that wasn't mine. She blinked hard and muttered something under her breath. I didn't ask her to repeat it. I didn't need to. I wasn't looking for a confession. I was looking for the last piece of evidence to stop feeling crazy. And I had it now. She pulled into our driveway in silence. The house looked the same. Quiet, warm porch light, flower beds she never actually tended. A perfect little picture. Nothing on the outside said this house was rotting from the inside out. She killed the engine, but neither of us moved. The air between us thickened. You think you're some kind of martyr? She finally said. You want to play the victim now, Orson? You let this happen. You made it easy. That part almost got me. Almost. The old me might have taken the bait, started listing all the things I could have done better, all the moments I stayed late at work, all the evenings I forgot to ask how her day was. But not this time. This time, I just sat there, wine-stained and tired, and said nothing. That silence was louder than anything I could have screamed. She opened her door, stepped out, and slammed it shut behind her. I didn't follow. Not yet. Because something in me was starting to shift, and I needed a minute to figure out what came next, now that the last lie had fallen away. I stayed in the car for almost 15 minutes after she went inside. The engine had long gone cold, but I didn't feel it. My body was still warm, not with anger, not exactly. It was something quieter than that. Heavier. Like a long, low note that had been playing inside my chest for years, and I'd only now started to really hear it. The house looked normal. 2 porch lights. Wreath on the door. Curtains drawn. But everything about it felt staged, like one of those model homes you walk through that looks perfect until you realize none of the drawers open and the fridge is fake. I eventually forced myself to go in. I opened the front door quietly, out of habit more than anything else. She hated it when I stomped around, like a clumsy buffalo, she used to say. So I walked gently through the house that no longer felt like mine. The hallway lights were dimmed. I could hear her upstairs, pacing. Barefoot, sharp steps. She was on the phone, her voice hushed but sharp-edged. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I could tell by the tone. She wasn't panicking. She was rehearsing. Damage control. I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared inside, closed it. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't anything. I walked to the sink, washed my hands out of instinct, and looked up at the tiny chalkboard calendar she kept on the wall. Appointments, reminders, notes she left for herself. This week, only one phrase was written in pink chalk. Be unforgettable. She'd drawn a heart next to it. That made me smile, not because it was sweet, because it was so perfectly her. Even when she was planning to destroy someone, she dressed it in glitter and motivational quotes. Eventually, she came down. Not in pajamas, not with remorse smeared across her face like in the movies. She looked polished, hair brushed, a fresh layer of makeup, like she'd prepped for a confrontation the way one might prepare for a televised debate. She walked into the living room, arms folded. So what now? I sat on the edge of the couch. I'm not sure. That box, the one at the event, what was in it? Does it matter? I asked. She didn't answer, just stared at me like she was trying to solve a math equation that wouldn't balance. I could see the flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. For years, she had known exactly how to push me, how to poke the bruises I was too polite to admit I had. But now, this version of me, the one who didn't cry or beg or accuse, she didn't know what to do with him. You embarrassed me, she finally said. I blinked. You poured wine on me. You made a scene after. By leaving. By coming back. That one stunned me. I actually laughed, a dry, tired sound that surprised both of us. So what? I'm supposed to just vanish quietly? Let you ruin me and still clap for your speech? Her jaw tightened. I didn't ruin you. You're right. I said, standing slowly. I ruined myself by staying as long as I did. She flinched, not visibly, but I saw it. Her fingers curled against her arms. Who is he? I asked, not because I wanted to know, but because I needed to hear her lie. She took a beat too long to answer. No one. Not anymore. There it was. Not a name. Not a denial. Just the carefully placed wreckage of an affair she hadn't bothered to bury properly. I nodded. You're really not good at hiding things anymore. She didn't argue. I walked past her, up the stairs, into her bedroom. I didn't touch anything. I didn't pack a bag. I just stood there, letting the silence settle around me like dust. This wasn't the kind of heartbreak you cry through. This was the kind that makes you still. Empty. And in that stillness, I made a decision. Quiet. Absolute. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw things. But I was going to end this on my terms. She had her theater. Her audience. Now it was my turn to write the final act. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I sat in the upstairs hallway in the dark, outside the bedroom door, listening to the sound of her brushing her teeth and pretending nothing was wrong. She hummed something tuneless, a nervous habit. After all the venom she'd spit at me just hours earlier, now she was humming. Like I was supposed to forget everything the moment we walked back into this house. She didn't say goodnight. She closed the bedroom door. Locked it. That was her real tell. She never locked the door unless she was hiding something. I spent the next 3 hours on the couch, not scrolling, not thinking, just breathing, watching the light from the street lamps stretch across the ceiling, shrink, then stretch again as cars passed by. Eventually, I got up, went to the kitchen, and pulled out my laptop. Not to send her an email, not to draft a letter, to log into the shared accounts. It started small. Amazon, Spotify, the grocery delivery app. I changed the passwords, removed her devices, logged her out of every service she relied on that I had quietly paid for over the last 5 years. And there were many. She'd used my name, my credit, my address. At first, it felt like teamwork. Then it became entitlement. She never even bothered to remember the login info. I was the system admin of her lifestyle. So I shut it all down. By 4 a.m., her side of the digital world was starting to decay, not violently, not noticeably. Not yet. But it was unraveling. And she wouldn't realize it until she tried to order her morning latte through her favorite app and found out her profile didn't exist. She'd assume it was a glitch. She always thought she was too clever to be outmaneuvered. By 6 a.m., I called the bank. I wasn't petty. I didn't empty anything. But I unlinked my accounts from hers. The car insurance. The phone plan. Her card on the streaming services. I didn't yell or post about it. I just removed myself, cell by cell, from the tangled financial skeleton of our marriage. And by 7:30, when she woke up, none of it showed. Yet, she came down in one of those silk robes she only wore when she wanted to look effortlessly powerful. Messy hair, bare face, but lips painted red like armor. She looked at me sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like it was any other day, and raised an eyebrow. I thought you'd be gone by now. I'm making breakfast, I said calmly, gesturing to the 2 eggs sizzling in the pan. Would you like some? She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I hadn't. I just found it. You're not seriously thinking we're going to pretend last night didn't happen, she said. No, I replied. I'm just thinking you might want eggs before your day gets complicated. She blinked, tilted her head. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I just slid her plate across the counter and walked upstairs without another word. Later that afternoon, I watched from the study window as she stormed outside in a frenzy, phone pressed to her ear, shouting at some poor customer service rep about why her rideshare app wouldn't take her saved card. She didn't know that same card had been deactivated 2 hours earlier. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was subtraction. She'd taken so much from me over the years. Time, money, self-worth, but always subtly. Soft sabotage. I was just returning the gesture with a mirror. No explosions. No threats. Just quiet erasure. That evening, she stood in the hallway holding a pile of mail, bank notices, unsubscribed catalogs, account change confirmations, and stared at me with pure, sharpened confusion. Are you trying to punish me? No, I said honestly. I'm just reclaiming what's mine. She didn't say anything, because for the first time in our entire relationship, she didn't know what came next. But I did, and it wasn't going to involve this house much longer. The beauty of unraveling a life is that no one notices it right away, not even the one who's being left behind. Mary Bell still thought she was in control, that the silence, the calm tone, the quiet mornings and skipped arguments meant I was broken, defeated, still clinging to her in some invisible way. That was her favorite delusion, the idea that I couldn't survive without her, that I was comfortable being the wallpaper in her loud, curated life. But I wasn't disappearing out of weakness. I was strategically vanishing. It started with my clothes. Not all at once, not enough to draw suspicion. Just a shirt here, a jacket there. I folded them carefully into my old duffel bag, the one she hated because it was so bachelor pad, and kept it in the trunk of my car. I moved some files off my laptop onto an external drive, took down the framed wedding photo from my home office, slipped it behind the bookshelf. Every day, I removed one item that had made this house feel like home to me. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and didn't want to ask. On Wednesday, she made salmon and set 2 plates on the table. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention the wine. But she did light a candle, which was her way of pretending things were normal. I was thinking we could go to that place in Auburn this weekend, she said casually. The one with the vineyard. They're having a seasonal tasting. I didn't answer right away. I watched the candle flicker between us. Her tone was too light. Her voice, too smooth. Like she was offering peace without ever admitting there'd been a war. I don't think I'll be around this weekend, I said. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, why not? I've got some things to handle. She raised an eyebrow. Since when do you have plans? The jab was subtle, almost reflexive. But I felt it. Years ago, that comment would have turned into a fight. Now, it just confirmed how little she thought of me. How little she'd ever thought of me. And yet she had no idea what was slipping through her fingers. I didn't explain further. And that silence? It unnerved her more than any outburst could have. Later that night, after she'd gone upstairs and pretended to sleep, I walked into the garage. I had already packed 2 more bags, one with my documents, one with the gifts I'd given her over the years that she never appreciated. I didn't want them anymore, but I wasn't about to leave them behind for her to resell or pretend she bought herself. I dropped both bags in the back seat of my car. Then I stood in the driveway and looked up at the house. Not angrily, not sentimentally, just studied it. Like a building I once worked in that I knew I'd never enter again. I had spent 5 years trying to build something in that house. A life, a future, a home. And she had treated it like a showroom. Polished from the outside, empty at the core. Inside, she was asleep in the bed we used to share. I wondered if she felt anything when I wasn't next to her anymore. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. I wondered if she even noticed how far I'd already gone while still sleeping under the same roof. That's the thing no one tells you about the end. Sometimes, it doesn't come with screaming or cheating or slamming doors. Sometimes, it comes when the other person finally realizes you're already gone, and you didn't leave them a key, a note, or a warning. You just stopped showing up. And soon, I'd stop answering too. I left before sunrise. No dramatic note. No final confrontation. No suitcase dragged through the hallway for effect. Everything I needed was already in my car. Everything I didn't, which turned out to be almost everything, I left behind. She was still asleep. At least I think she was. And maybe some part of me hoped she'd hear the front door close, bolt upright in bed, come running, ask why. But no footsteps followed. No voice called after me. And that was the final answer I needed. It was almost poetic, really. How quiet it was. The same house where I had once waited hours just to get a moment of her attention was now completely, utterly still. And it didn't feel like I was escaping. It felt like I was waking up from a very long, very strange dream. I didn't go far at first. I rented a small guest house 2 towns over, nothing fancy. Just a clean bed, a working kitchen, and sunlight that poured in through the windows without apology. The kind of place that didn't carry echoes. The first few days were weird. I kept reaching for habits that weren't mine anymore. Checking her calendar, cooking double portions, scrolling through saved articles I thought she'd want to read. But slowly, my fingers stopped reaching. My brain stopped expecting. And the silence, the same silence that used to feel like punishment in her presence, began to feel like healing. She called once. I let it ring. Then again. Then a text. So that's it. No anger. No comeback. Just those 3 words. I stared at it for a long time, then typed a reply and deleted it 3 times. I didn't want to gloat. I didn't want to lecture. I didn't want to beg. Eventually, I sent back one sentence. It should have been over the first time you looked at me like I was a burden. She never responded. And that was okay. I started running again. Not far, not fast, but enough to breathe. I signed up for an online woodworking class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for, because she said the sawdust made her throat itch. I started sleeping better. I even laughed out loud one morning watching some dumb cooking video where the host dropped a pan and screamed. And then, one afternoon, I sat in a quiet cafe with my laptop open, updating my resume for the first time in years, and I looked around and thought, I don't miss her. Not the drama, not the silence, not the constant fear that my love would never be enough. I missed who I thought she was. But that version of her never really existed. She was just the projection of a man who was too afraid to be alone, a man who had once believed being chosen was the same thing as being valued. Now I know better. I wasn't the loser she said I was. I was just with someone who needed to call me that to feel like she was winning. But I've stopped playing her game. And it turns out, when you leave someone who drains you, you don't just get your life back. You get yourself back. And that's the best thing I've ever come home to.